Greetings and welcome to The Black Room. This is the podcast for all things erotic mind control, and I am your host, Callidus. And thank you for joining me again. I want to thank everyone also for checking out last week's episode featuring the first part of my interview with Mistress Love. I got a lot of nice notes on that. I know she said that she did as well. So thank you everyone for checking that out. And the second part of Mistress Love's interview is going to be coming up in just a little while. But before that, I want to talk about a few stories on the archive. There was not an update last weekend, so there was a pretty big deluge of new content that went up over at the archive this weekend, and among them was not one but two new stories from Softi, who is one of my favorite artists. I think that she's a she. I actually don't know that to be a fact, but I've heard her referred to as a she. So I'm going to keep rolling with it, and if I'm wrong, they can correct me, and I'll be happy to apologize. But in any case, Softi has done some really, really great writing over the years, very talented author, and there's two new stories that went up this week. The first of which I'm going to talk about in relative detail, and then the second I'll set up. I'll kind of give you the premise a little bit, but I won't spoil too much. The first story I'm going to talk about is Foxtail. And I am going to go into spoilers on this. So if you're not interested in hearing anything about this, then you can just skip ahead to the next section. Foxtail, according to Softi, was influenced by Cat Slave and Eye of Serpent, some of their stories. Cat Slave and Eye of Serpent, again, being two of my favorite authors. So reading that at the top, very good news for me. The premise of this story, or I suppose perhaps the genre, is mind control via an addictive sex toy. Our favorite, right? This is a subgenre of mind control that typically features some sort of sex toy or object that's used to create this irresistible need to masturbate, and through many cycles of build-up and release, slowly the subject's mind unravels in this erotic haze. It's always very, very fun. One of the best examples of this, and I think the first that I read, was Shockingly Black by Eye of Serpent, which is excellent, and I imagine was definitely playing on Softi's mind as she was putting this together, but definitely one worth checking out. But before you do that, make sure and read Foxtail because it's excellent. So again, spoilers here. I'm just going to go into the story. The lead character is a young woman named Mackenzie who witnesses one of her neighbors wearing a foxtail butt plug and playing with it as she's entering her apartment. Now later, she ends up seeing the same girl covertly spirited off into the night by a couple of Amazons and some other woman sort of overseeing, controlling the affair. And they see her, and she gets very paranoid about this, and she's not sure what's going on. And of course, she begins to worry that perhaps they're going to come get her too, which of course ends up happening. She comes home, and they're in her apartment waiting for her, and they jump her, they grab her, they strip her clothes off, and they insert one of these foxtail butt plugs, which, as it turns out, causes intense arousal. And every time she touches it to try to get it out, she just ends up wanting to masturbate with it more. So this only gets worse / better as she goes through these cycles. She has a failed 911 call, which doesn't end up going too well. And this endless cycle of masturbation slowly begins to wear down her mind. Now, eventually, her roommate, Lori, comes to the rescue. Can you hear the air quotes? And Mackenzie begs her to pull the foxtail out. And of course, it's this very weird, awkward moment between roommates. Eventually, Lori, she pulls out the foxtail. And Mackenzie's too distressed to really go into an explanation. Lori, the situation being as awkward as it is, leaves to go clean the thing off. And then Mackenzie hears footsteps going from the bathroom into Lori's room. And so she goes to see what Lori's up to, and she walks in and Lori is naked from the waist down with some lube, and she's squatting and inserting this thing herself. And Mackenzie wants to stop her, but also can't really quite work up the will to do it. And so Lori ends up with this thing in her butt, and the fun just takes off from there. They end up helping each other, again, the air quotes I hope you can hear. They end up helping each other quite a few times to very pleasant effect. And of course, eventually, the controller and the Amazons show back up and discover not one, but two new slave girls for their evil mind control conspiracy. And so it's a happy ending for everyone, I guess is what I'm saying. But it's extremely hot. There's some really, really great stuff. Softi is really phenomenal at using arousal as a way of wearing down resistance and will. And she does that extremely well in her stories. And this one is no exception. There's some really, really hot stuff here. Definitely worth checking out. The second story, as if one terrific story from one of my favorite authors wasn't enough, there's two. And the second one is called Saving Abby. Now, I'm only going to go into minor spoilers here. I'm just going to sort of talk about the setup, the premise of the story, and just a few little details, but I won't spoil everything here. In this story, the protagonist is a woman named Sam, who is looking for her sister Abby, who has gone missing. And Sam has heard rumors, and she's read these accounts on the deep web about women disappearing and impossible things like mind control and sex slaves and this kind of thing. So these shadowy rumors have led her to a club at the end of a long dark alley, and they've got a secret knock and a password. So she goes into this club looking for her sister Abby. And what she discovers is a man named Cade, who she believes is responsible for her sister's disappearance. And Cade is in this VIP area, bodyguards all around, surrounded by these sort of blank-faced, very, very attractive women. And she manages to kind of get his attention, and now she's trying to figure out a way to get a little bit closer and see if she can find out anything. Well, she ends up being invited over. But it turns out that the only way that Cade is going to speak to her, the only way that she's going to have any chance to get anything about where her sister might be is she has to agree to be hypnotized by Cade. And there's some great internal struggle going on within her. She agrees, she has to pretend to go under, but he senses that she's resisting and he's working against that. So she's got to pretend like he's overcoming her resistance, but she's got to try to hang on to her mind and the reason why she's there. And it's just some terrific male-dominant trance scenes between these two characters. And I will leave it there. I won't go into it any further, but it is excellent. Definitely worth reading. And I just think there's a lot of things to it that work very, very well. I love some of the specific scenes, some of the specific imagery, but also the overall sort of arc of what we go through and the way that you see these long-term effects, which is something that I always really appreciate. I like when the story sort of spends enough time and we kind of see how a character is affected by what they're experiencing, and this is right in that zone. Softi says that this story was really influenced by a Trilby Ellis story, which is one of my absolute favorites, called Bridesmaid, and then a jukebox story called Flesh for Fantasy. So really good pedigree as far as what was sort of on her mind as she was doing this. I find Softi to be she's very humble typically in her enlisting her influences, and she's always quick to point out that the original authors did the idea better and everything. But And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that she's being falsely modest. I'm just saying that I think she's probably selling herself short. She's a fantastic talent. She does some terrific stories, some ridiculously hot things. And if you are unfamiliar with her, you need to check her out. And if you are familiar with her, then you need to add these two to your list of softy stories that you've read. And if you happen to fall into that first category, if you're not all that familiar with softy, two of her stories that I have always loved, been really big for me, one is called Melting, and it sets up this really cool sort of world and mythos about this society of female owners and these estates that they have filled to the brim with beautiful female slaves that have been indoctrinated and brainwashed into their station as sex slaves. And this society has a ruling council. They have laws like don't enslave another owner. And Melting is, I think, a 5-part story about an owner named Cassandra who is slowly corrupted and sinks into submission. And it's a very satisfying, protracted trip watching that happen. And then there's a follow-up to Melting called Cover, which picks up with an owner named Claire, who is assigned, essentially, I think she's sort of given Cassandra's estate and all of her slaves and everything in the aftermath of Cassandra losing her status as an owner. And the story follows Claire through her own brush with temptation, and also one of the other characters who's pulling the strings from behind the scenes in all this, and how she's going about keeping everybody off her scent. It's really, really good stuff. Both of those stories, highly recommended. Some really, really hot moments, and just some great overall writing from Softy. So those are 2 stories from the Weekend Update at the Erotic Mind Control Story Archive that you check out. There's a whole lot of other things on there as well that I have not yet gotten to. There's a jukebox story that I'm anxious to check out, as well as a new chapter in Absolution from Madame Kistulat. Mistress Love has a couple of pieces going up there, so there's definitely some fun stuff going on this weekend at the archive. Now, last week, if you tuned in, then you know that I did a really, really big chunk of the show talking about a YouTube channel I'd found that gathered a lot of MC clips, brainwashing stuff from film and TV. I've got another YouTube recommendation for you this week, but we're going to the other end of the spectrum now. This is a channel featuring all original content. So the channel is SwingingWatch, and it features content from a pay hypno kink video site called GirlsGoneHypnotized, which I've heard of, but have not been really familiar with their stuff. So on their YouTube channel, they have a big collection of trailers and previews for all of their videos that you can go to their site and purchase, which I think is a great idea. You get a couple minutes of footage. Of course, they don't show any nudity or anything like that, but you get a couple minutes of footage. You see kind of the setup for the video, sort of the premise. You get a bit of the induction, whatever style it might be in that particular video, and it really gives you enough to get a good sense of the tone, the vibe of what that video is going to be about. One thing that I really like that they're doing is, in addition to the traditional sort of swinging pocket watch hypnosis style scenes, they also have a lot of brainwashing content. And I guess I should also just say, just for clarification, that I don't think that anything that they're doing on their site is actual hypnosis, as opposed to a site like hypnolust.com, who states that like everything that you see on there, that's actual hypnosis going on and so forth. This is all acted stuff, but they get into, I think, some really interesting storylines and darker kind of flavors and things. They use some great props, and there's some cool lighting effects and things that they put together with their props that you'll see used through some of their videos. Hypnotic glasses and visors. They have this cool glass-walled conditioning booth. There's a brainwashing room that shows up a few times. Mind control rays. girls tranced by computer screens and smartphones, winding up in lycra bodysuits. One of my favorites is called Built for Pleasure, and it features a brainwashing and reprogramming segment involving a salon-styled dryer chair with these flashing lights wired into the dome. And this lovely brunette ends up strapped into the chair and undergoes mind programming, and yada, yada, yada. She ends up a silver robot girl towards the end. Very cool stuff. I thought it was great. Most of their titles are $11 or $13 if you get them through Clips for Sale, but you can get them for $8 to $10 if they are online on the website and available to take your order manually. So if you catch them at the right time, you can save $3. But even at $11 or $13, it's pretty reasonable given what some of the videos in the Hypno Kink community can end up costing. So either way, I don't think the prices are all that bad. If you are a fan of attractive young women being mind controlled and getting naked, then I think that you ought to check out SwingingWatch on YouTube or GirlsGoneHypnotized.com. Okay, next up, this is a little less related to erotic content, but this is a software recommendation for writers. I know I've talked about some photo software and things like that in the past for artists, but I've been writing quite a bit lately, and I've been writing screenplays. I've been writing stuff for video projects that I'm hoping to talk a little bit more about very soon, actually. But I've been doing some writing, and the screenwriting software I was working, I've really gotten tired of it. It's free, and it's pretty well featured for free software. It's called Celtics, and it's just reached the point where they've launched a commercial product at this point, a commercial service actually, and they're no longer updating their software. And so I thought, maybe it's time to kind of move on. And I wasn't really happy. The last time that I wrote a screenplay with it, it was kind of arduous. So I thought, I'm going to go ahead and look for something new. So I went through this big research journey over the course of a few days and just looking at all the different software that was out there. And the answer, interestingly enough, is a piece of software that I bought almost 8 years ago, back in 2007, called Scrivener. And Scrivener is really interesting. I bought it at the time and never really quite figured out how to use it because, in all honesty, it can be just a little bit daunting if you don't quite understand the philosophy of how it's intended to be used, which I didn't at the time. And I just kind of used it for outlining and a little bit of brainstorming, but no actual writing. But Scrivener is really designed to be a one-stop shop for everything a writer would want to do, and not just for screenplays. Scrivener supports novels and short story formats, nonfiction formats like essays, research papers, APA format, MLA format, in addition to screenplays, stage plays. You can use it. They've got formats for comic or graphic novels. So it's a pretty diverse program in terms of what it can do. The thing that I think is so fantastic about it, and what really got me to drop the money on getting an upgrade to the latest version, is it's got fantastic tools for the research and kind of brainstorming process, which I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, I tend to research, I tend to outline, I tend to think a lot about sort of what I'm going to do in the story, and then once I've been through that preparation period, then I'll get into actually writing the screenplay. And I find that I usually end up doing those two tasks in 2 or sometimes 3 different programs. And Scrivener will allow you to do all of that in the same application. You create these binders, and you can bring in notes, you can create outlines, you can just freeform type, use bullet lists, whatever you're comfortable doing, but you can just get your ideas down very, very fast. If you've got photos that you want to have handy that maybe remind you of a character you're writing, or a setting that you're placing your story in, you can bring in photos, you can bring in PDFs, you can create to-do lists for yourself and keep yourself on track with what you're trying to accomplish. You can import whole web pages if you need to, if that's part of your research. And you can organize all of this either as a list of documents, or you can arrange them as if they were on a corkboard with push pins, or in an outline view that's very easy to digest. There's a lot of flexibility there, and I think that's probably one of the biggest things to get across about Scrivener, is that it's very easy to use, and yet it's incredibly customizable, so that you can really, really make the software work the way that you want it to, and you can really adapt it, I think, to whatever way of writing is most comfortable for you. If you're one of those people, and I tend to be easily distracted, and so I really like programs that offer a full screen writing mode where you get rid of everything else on your desktop and you just have the words on the page, and Scrivener has that. You can customize, the colors of the fonts and the backgrounds. You can throw a background image in, all that kind of stuff. So if what I'm describing sounds like it's got too many toys for you to get any writing done, you just go into composition mode and it gets rid of everything, and then it's just the keyboard and the words on the screen. It's really great. It is available for Mac and Windows. It's $45 on Mac, it's $40 on Windows. They have education licenses available. There's a 30-day trial with all the features enabled. They've got a very generous home license, so you buy it one time and you can install it on any computer that you own or are the primary user of. So they're very, very gracious about that. They've got a great YouTube channel set up that has tutorials and walkthroughs, just show you how the software is designed to be used from their perspective, but also how you can adapt it to the way that you want to work. And they show off some of the great features. Like, you can be writing something and you might suddenly get an idea. Like the other night I was writing a scene and I suddenly had an idea for how I would go about shooting the scene, like basically like a production note, like how I would do something with the lighting and the camera, something that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate to put into the actual screenplay. It would kind of break away from the prose too much. But I just highlight the section of text where that scene is taking place, and I create a note in my brainstorming folder and just really quickly write some instructions for what it was I had in mind. So now anytime I'm reading through my script, I can link to these production notes that I keep for myself. And so it'll continue to be useful, not just in the pre-production and planning process, but also in the production process later. It's a really, really cool piece of software. If you are a writer, if you're thinking about becoming a writer, and you're looking for an application that will allow you to write, research, brainstorm, collect all your ideas, and get your writing done, I think Scrivener is worth checking out. Okay, so with that, I believe I have talked enough about things that are not interviews with Mistress Love, and I know that a lot of you are very eager to get to part 2. So I'm going to shut up now, and here's the second half of my conversation with the merry and mesmerizing Mistress Love. Let's talk shop just a little bit. What software do you prefer for photo editing? And of course, now the animation, you do a lot of animated GIFs now. Mm-hmm. What software are you using these days for that?
Well, I obviously Photoshop, InDesign, those kind of programs, Adobe stuff. Yeah, that's basically that's all I use.
What's your feeling on the whole Creative Cloud thing and them going to the subscription model? Are you a fan of that?
No, I'm not.
I'm not either. I'm not either.
I don't like that at all. It sucks.
Yeah, this is a big tangent that we could drop into, but I'll just say briefly that I actually spend quite a bit of my time looking around for things to jump ship to away from, because I'm still using CS6, which was the last version of the Adobe Creative Suite that was sold. And,
yes, that's the one I have as well.
It's the one that I own, so that's probably what I'll be with for a little while. But it is kind of frustrating because I'm just not interested in giving them X amount of money per month forever.
No, me neither. I don't want to give them all my money.
No. Are you on Windows or Mac?
I'm on Windows right now.
Okay. Well,
I'm on an Alienware right now.
Oh, that's a good system for running Second Life.
Yeah, it is.
Speaking of animated GIFs, I was actually just in preparation for our conversation today. I was going through your Tumblr this afternoon and just looking through all of the recent things that you've posted. And you've got some really sophisticated stuff in terms of your animated GIFs. You actually do an interesting variety of things. Now, some of it is cover art for your hypnosis MP3s.
That's right. Yes.
And but there's some others in there that are more just, I would kind of refer to them as sort of promotional sorts of posters that, just sexy stuff to bring people to Tumblr so that, they can see what you've been doing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people enjoy it.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I think if you look at Tumblr is an interesting place in terms of the erotic mind control content, because it is very interesting how the technological limitations of Tumblr have influenced the kinds of work that are being done there. And given the fact that GIFs were really super popular on Tumblr, even more so than video, it's very interesting how that culture has extended to the erotic mind control stuff, where animated GIFs really are the currency of the realm.
Yeah.
But anyway, getting back to the animated GIFs thing.
Okay. Yes.
How did you get into that? Is that something that you've just started in recently?
Yeah, not I guess maybe about 6 months ago, maybe, or a little bit longer than that. Not very, just I was looking for images for a cover I was doing.
Yeah.
Manipping is all that what I could find for good sources, and I found Tumblr as I was searching, and actually I found a Dreaming Darkly manips on the search that I did, and it led me to Tumblr, and I thought that I would post my samples there, and
Right.
at the time I was experimenting with my covers to make them stand out more, so people could obviously buy my files. And I remember Bunny showing me how to do the animation with Photoshop. And so I thought, well, why not, do some simple files for the covers. And since they are virtual in nature, I had to learn how to create them and then save them, and how a GIF works. And the first ones, it took a long time to make. Love slots was the first one, because I wanted it to have the spinning slots. After I posted a few, the followers started coming in droves, and they so did the letters, and I love it, love it, love it. And so I did some more experimental ones with some of the spirals that I found right there on Tumblr. I just used what I found,
Right.
along with the images that others were posting, combining them with flashes of messages, and they went over like really, really well, and they still do. And so I started doing them regularly for a while, until the Photoshop I was using had some issues, and it kind of had some copyright issues. And then
Right.
so I lost Photoshop on my regular computer, and then I had to use my old computer with a major setback. But I just sort of slowed down a little bit after that happened. But it's a lot of fun, just to come up with some ideas. And like I said, a lot of people, they really enjoy those, and making those as well, like to sell my files. I think it gets people's attention for sure.
It certainly does. I have to commend you, because I think it's an absolutely brilliant strategy, and it's a very different kind of the particular kinds of animated GIFs that you do, which they involve the user. They're very much designed to kind of draw the user into, if not actual hypnosis, certainly a fantasy of hypnosis.
Sure.
In viewing this image.
For sure.
And I find that's really, really popular on Tumblr, and you're certainly, I think, one of the top ones for that. Hypnoloord. Do you follow Hypnoloord's Tumblr?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Hypnoloord is like, I really love the content is not always necessarily to my taste, but his style and the aesthetic quality and everything that he has with color, font choice, and those kinds of things. I'm a big fan. As a matter of fact, I'm going to talk about his Tumblr on an episode of the show at some point.
Cool.
But in any case, I have to commend you, because it's really, really well done, the stuff you do, and I find that I don't quite have the facility for it. Like something about whereas my stuff tends to be very, very story focused. It's a different kind of approach when the focus really is more about that fantasy of hypnotizing the user directly.
For sure. It's a lot of fun.
You're very good at it.
Thank you. I enjoy it very much.
So yes, and that's obvious from listening to some of the files that you have, a couple that you shared with me. It's obvious that you enjoy what you do, and I was going to ask you about, how you came to be Mistress Love and you got into the hypnotic audio side of things. But given the fact that you have such a lovely voice and that you have been interested in mind control and DS for so long, I suppose it wasn't really all that big a transition so much as just a logical kind of progression.
Yeah, like the voicing came about while partying actually with a young lady that I met at a dance club that worked in a recording studio, and I named her Bunny as well. And but she was not the same Bunny as the man nipper from the collective, but I just had a soft spot for Bunny as a partner's name. She and I were talking, and I had never been in a real recording studio before. And at the time, I was, just looking or, just kind of more discovering Enraptured at the time. And I had, in the past, listened to Nikki Fatale's work. And she and, of course, Richard Anthony was another one that I listened to. And when Bunny asked if I could sing, which I can, sort of, but I wasn't really thinking singing. And I wanted to give a go at recording a short hypnosis session like Nikki and Richard. And so after drinking one night, we snuck into the studio and we actually recorded the 15-minute session of All You Need Is Love. And I paid her for studio time and her time, of course. And Bunny, she's an amazing producer. And I would have to say the comments back were totally outstanding. And I made back my initial investment in donations. And I also released more files after that. It had a disastrous result, though, from other hypno dominants. They didn't take too kindly to free files, because I was giving out free files at the start.
Oh, and, really?
Yeah, I did free files for donations for a while, and then the donations started to get less and less. And at the same time, Samba, through Sensual Mistress, was working on the website for dominants to post erotic hypnosis files for sale. And then I decided it was a better way to distribute them. And so I set out with Bunny to do some fun files, and I received scripts from some people. And on the average, I wrote most of the scripts myself, along with answering the letters and having a fun time. And like the early days of the collective, only I was making something more, and that's kind of how it all started. And now I have close to 200 files now.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. This afternoon I went and listened to All You Need Is Love, which somebody's posted to YouTube.
That's right.
Along with a slideshow of imagery and stuff. Which I don't know if any of that is images that you've created or if it's just things that they pulled from around the net.
They just pulled it from the net. Yeah.
But in any case, after listening to that, I went and checked your page on Sensual Mistress. And noticed that you have some ridiculous number of I can't remember the exact number of pages that are a part of your profile, but I mean it's amazing. Well, okay, I'm here right now. 17. So you have 17 pages of erotic hypnotic goodies.
Yeah.
For sale on sensualmistress.com.
Yeah, and I have different series as well, right? Like the Dr. Love series and All You Need Is Love series.
Yep.
Bimbo series. The exploration I had done have been so varied because people's fetishes are varied, of course.
Certainly.
And I get close to 1,000 letters a week, like a lot. I have so many emails you wouldn't believe it.
That's a lot.
It is a lot, and some weeks are more, some are less. And the ideas some people have are totally fun. Transformation, deep surrender. I did a fandom file that had some people up in arms. And others loved it. The Jungle Book theme I got into. You saw the one that
favorites.
That I did from the inspiration of one of your manips. And the Harlequin stories too were based on television shows like Scooby-Doo and G.I. Joe, and as well as other stories. There is a Circus of Love where I explored the midway and the hypnotic side shows like the Mermaid and the Fortune Teller. And I like to start a theme and then run with it. And I had a girl from Germany that requested cowification trance. And Ellie is her name. And she writes me still after over 2 years. And I've done several with her. I also do the trances for individuals, custom ones as well. And they get to hear their names in it, of course. And with the followers. And there's also vampires and ghost trances that I do as well. And I did a whispered trance that was very well received. And I have also explored the BDSM themes with latex and bondage.
Yes.
I am actually coming up on my 200th hypnosis MP3 release soon. And
Wow.
likely by the time that people hear this, I'll hopefully be past that number, because I have about 3 or 4 scripts right now in the making. And of course, I still release free files now and then. I put them on the page for free download. And I have a great friend down in the States that releases samples and free files on YouTube. So a big thank you to my slave Plow Horse. He's amazingly dedicated to me, and as is fast to make some great YouTube releases.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's the YouTube channel that I've got pulled up from earlier today. So
yeah, he's been with me for a while. So
way to go, Plow Horse.
Yeah.
Talking about all the different things that you explore in your audio files, do you find yourself striking a balance between what your interests specifically are and what you hope will be interesting to your listening audience?
Well, let's face facts. I wouldn't do what I do all the time if it didn't interest me. You don't make money doing the files. Well, not as much for the amount of work that you put into them.
Right.
Or maybe I'm not selling them enough. I don't know. Of course, the fact that I have to pay for studio time and have a producer doing them rather than me doing the editing costs, more as well. But, I digress. I strike a little balance. I'm not into some of the fetishes, but I am very much into the fandom. And every one of my trances is based on that. So.
Several years ago, you reached out to me about adapting a photo series that I had done called Terabot into an erotic hypnosis file, and you ended up building on sort of the premise that I laid out in that series, and really turning it into this very sexy tale. And so the reason I bring this up is that, based on that, it was obvious to me that you had a great interest in storytelling and erotica as narrative. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that process, the process of writing for you, whether it's whether it is one of your hypnosis MP3s or anything else? What is that like?
Well, we are, in many ways, we're all storytellers when we do the man-ups, and there is no different. It's no different when you do a trance. You lead the person on a journey. You influence them to trust in you, and you let go of their fears. And sometimes when you play on those fears, I go on a regular basis to MC stories. And as anyone in this community must, in fact, I started recently to post some of my actual sessions stories on there. Mm-hmm. And I figure it's good to give back as much as I can. Every trance I do is pre-written by me. I go over every word of it, figure out how to put myself into the role as the dominant. And, it's important to me that the script is, sound before I record. And there are times I don't record for a few weeks because I get writer's block. Total writer's block. I've had, great responses to 2 that I just put out. I had to close to 200 to share, and I'm learning towards the story-based ones more so far, like Lamnia, since there is so many writing to me that they like reading the scripts as well as me recording it. So I'll release more like that too. I think a lot of people are enjoying that.
In general, what do you find that your audience really enjoys, or is it more difficult to kind of pin that kind of thing down?
Bimbo.
The bimbo stuff. That's interesting.
Yeah, bimbo. Like the exploration I have done, has been so varied because people's fetishes are varied, obviously.
Certainly.
So like I said, like bimbo, transformation. A lot of people are into that. They love to be transformed.
I'm curious about the bimbo thing is interesting because I used to kind of actively dislike it a bit. And it wasn't until Tumblr and I started reading a couple of blogs about women that were really interested in the bimbo or bimbofication. Mm-hmm. The transformation into a bimbo.
Right. And some women like that stuff too. They like it.
Yeah, when I began to understand it from their perspective, because there was something about it that I don't know that just seemed, and this is nothing against role play or anybody's fetishes. I begrudge no one what they're interested in, but for me personally, something about male dom bimbo stuff, I don't know, it just didn't really sit right with me for whatever reason. I didn't get into it as much.
Right.
And it wasn't until I guess I was sort of reassured by the fact that there was a female interest on the other side of that equation.
Yeah, I get lots of real women that want to feel that sensation, and it's fun. It's a funny thing, is that men that want it are usually higher profile males, like company men, CEOs, lawyers, men you would never expect to have this fetish. And I had one loyal listener for a long time that was a high profile lawyer. Yes. And he was working some major cases in the USA, and he was listening to me every night. I have, actors, celebrities, no naming names. A lot of them are on my Twitter as well. But they are listening to me. And I once was in a comic shop, and I was looking at the stacks and looking around, and the geeks behind the counter in a major city were actually talking about Mistress Love. They're just saying, love, she put out a new file, blah, blah, blah. And I'm listening for a while, and I'm like, huh?
That's amazing.
They were talking about, me, and it's something that I just released. And honestly, I was shocked. I'm standing there going, what? And of course, I don't give out my picture very often. I have given it to some of my most loyal fans. Yeah. These guys had no idea that the topic of their conversation was right there, right in front of them. And they didn't even, didn't even know.
Did you let them know? Did you hint, or did you just stay anonymous?
I just stayed anonymous. I just kind of giggled to myself. I was like, oh, and it was funny because when I went to the counter, I put my persona on just a little bit. I'm like, hello there. And they didn't click in. Which is good, but I was just playing around.
Bringing up comic books again, I want to just pause real fast to ask you something. I am curious about the name Mistress Love, because there is in fact a comic book character from the Marvel mythos called Mistress Love. And I'm just wondering, did you know that when you chose the name, was that an influence in any way?
No, it was not actually. No, it wasn't. It just kind of came out. That's what I was on Second Life. I picked Mistress Love. So that's how it all really generated all those years ago when I first started with Second Life.
Gotcha. Just happy coincidence.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something. Do you, since you are part of Second Life, and sounds like you have been for a little while, do you know Winter Rose on Second Life?
Yes, I do. Very well. Yes, I do.
I'm hoping. I've been in touch with him, and the forecast seems pretty favorable right now that he's going to be on a future episode of the show.
Oh, excellent.
He's actually created some of the hypnotic machines that people use in Second Life. I know that he did some of the scripting for several of those. Yes,
he has. And, him and I converse back and forth now and then and talk about different ideas and such as well.
Yeah. He's a very talented guy. Now, speaking of influences, that was somebody who was very, very influential on me. He casts a long shadow in the EMC community.
Yes.
For my money. Speaking of, but let's get back to you. You're what's important here. What does the future hold for Mistress Love? What are you? I mean, you have this big track record. You've done all these things. Hypnotic audios, images, graphics. You're publishing some of your stories and things like that now to the archive. What do you think the future holds? What do you want to do moving forward?
Well, as long as it's fun and I have loyal fans and followers. I plan to keep on making the files. I'm going actually into the studio tomorrow, in fact, to record a new one. I'm releasing my third story on MC Stories, and I'm already doing new covers that are animated for new files that I'll be doing. I'm working full time while I do this, and in keeping a roof over my head here in northern Canada, and sunbathing and exercising. I may slow down for a little bit next year. We'll see. I have to do a little plastic surgery that I have planned for next year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm getting a breast job.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I lost a lot of weight, and my breasts went from succulent double D's to a very slim and saggy C. So I'm planning on getting the girls fixed over the next year. So donations are accepted, of course, for this cause.
Well, and in pursuit of that, let's briefly tell people where they can find you.
Sure. They can email me at obeymistresslove@gmail.com. And they can email me. They can. I'm also on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, the Mistress Love, and of course Tumblr as well. You can find me on Second Life if you want to message me there too. So it's about $9,000 for this surgery. So any donations are greatly accepted. PayPal. I take PayPal.
Just don't let PayPal know.
No, and exactly. Give it as a gift.
The less PayPal knows, the better off we all are.
Exactly.
Although I'm curious to see if anything changes now that they're being spun off into an independent company. They're no longer going to be an eBay-owned entity. I'm curious if anything changes in that, because certainly PayPal has been it's been a tricky thing to navigate for anybody that's even brushing up against adult content in air quotes.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you something that might be of no interest to anyone else whatsoever. But have you had the unfortunate experience of dealing with this whole credit card processor mess as it relates to mind control content?
No. Through Sensual Mistress, I don't have any issues with that at all. He handles everything for me. Right. Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, honestly, it's a really great model, given the fact that so many people were having their ability to process credit cards yanked on just on the basis of content.
That's right. Yeah. No, I've had no issues at all with that at all. I've been. Yeah,
that's really good. And Sensual Mistress is a great site. There's a lot of really talented people
Ladies
on there,
yes,
producing a lot of really high quality content. There's free samples and everything, so it's a good time.
It is. There's lots there to choose from, and like I said, I have close to 200 files.
So if you're going to be visiting Sensual Mistress, spend a little time familiarizing yourself with Mistress Love's vast catalog. I'm sure it'll pay off for you. I'm sure you'll find something of interest.
And I was one of the first DOMs that was on that site, so I've been on it for the longest. So yeah, it's a good site.
Excellent. I'm extremely happy to hear it, and I'm extremely thankful that you took the time to come on the show and talk a little bit about all this. It's been a great conversation. I've really, really enjoyed it. You get a little bit of insight into the person behind all of this great work.
Thank you very much for having me on the show, and anytime.
And that is going to wrap things up. I want to thank my guest, Mistress Love, once again for coming on the show. It was really fun to talk to her, and we hope certainly that all of you enjoyed the conversation as well. Once again, you can find all the links to Mistress Love on Tumblr, on Twitter, and then of course where you can locate her files for purchase at sensualmistress.com. All of those are in the show notes, which you can find at podcast.callidus-mc.com. And I, of course, will be back next time with another episode of the Black Room Podcast. I welcome your comments, questions, and suggestions. As always, thank you for listening, and farewell.